So that's brown rice, wild rice, and cremini mushrooms with onions. And we're going to be talking about Blacklist, Murdock Mysteries Season 13, and Better Call Saul Season 4. And we've already talked about Better Call Saul before this season.
But it's worth talking about again. Oh, I'm sitting over on this side, okay?
Yeah, I made it easier for you this time.
There we go.
And James is going to be doing the review. I'm not feeling great. And I'm going to have some pasta sauce, which I canned a long time ago with my food. And mine's exactly the same as James's, only I'm having cauliflower too, and the pasta. He's having tuna sandwich.
Yeah. I think I'm going to make it 2 tuna open face sandwiches. So I'm going to talk about these things. So Better Call Saul, we've reviewed it at least once before, right?
Yeah, so we don't really have to.
No, we don't. It's pretty darn good. This actor, whatever his name is, the character is Jimmy something or other, and then Saul. Saul Goodman, there we go.
Yeah, but that's just a name he made up.
It's just a moniker. Yeah. Because he's all about selling himself. Mm-hmm. It's almost like he's sold to the devil. But yeah, he's a bad guy, but he's kind of yellowish kind of bad guy. So he's kind of like, you almost want to forgive him because he's kind of entertaining or something like that. If you got hosed by him in real life, it wouldn't be
if
so
he was taking your little figurine worth loads of money, or that Grandma gave you, you wouldn't be thrilled.
So a lot of people like the show that this is a spin-off of Breaking Bad. I actually prefer this to Breaking Bad.
I prefer this one too.
And there's some good acting in Breaking Bad. There's some overlap, like the retired cop gone bad.
And I mean, you love to see these characters in both of the shows. But honestly, I don't know if I'll even get to my pasta sauce. It's so good. But what I was going to say is, I mean, we watched this, and watching the last episode of
Blacklist,
that, I know, like, James is like, well, they were doing the responsible thing, and they're wrapping up the season without
I think they
subjecting the actors
CGI'd the stuff that they had in film.
Yeah.
And they were trying to make it look like
a comic book or whatever.
Or maybe in certain places like a video game.
Maybe. But it looks like a really crappy 80s video game. Honestly,
and a very bad comic book. So, it's like I said to Pauline, if I got a comic book like that sight unseen, I think I'd want to return it. Sometimes comic books have wonderful covers.
Yeah, I remember.
And then you open the thing up, and it's a different artist or a couple of artists. They used to have, probably still have pencilers and inkers.
Yeah.
And one of the worst things, of course, is you sometimes have writers, that just don't know how to write. Who was it? There's one artist, I'm glitching on his name, but I think he persisted in writing his stuff. So I think he came up with something like, what was it? Roller Skate Man or something like that. Neil Adams. I don't know if he wrote that. It was absolutely dreadful, but the artwork was wonderful, at least on the covers. I don't know. So, it's a real team sort of thing.
So what I was going to say about Blacklist is, I wish they wouldn't even have come up with the last episode for their season. I wish they would have just put it.
But they would have had contractual obligations, and you know how business guys are. We got to get product out there. It doesn't matter how crappy it is.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever. I mean, you knew where it was going to go anyway.
I guess. I didn't watch it.
And honestly, the last season, I couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on half the time.
Okay. Now this middle one, I think you're going to have to. Oh, this is Murdock Mysteries. I just
Yes.
don't recognize it from the back because I
Back.
don't see anybody there. But this is one of my favorite Canadian shows. Apparently, it's a CBC product. We get that from Matt Galloway boasting about it.
We
Matt,
know.
buddy.
You know that. I don't know if he was boasting. I think he was kind of putting it down or something.
Was
I don't
he?
know.
I don't know what he was. But this Murdock Mysteries is so much better than
It's great.
anything else CBC produces nowadays.
But I mean, after like, I loved watching this Murdock. It was an excellent season. It's you know, it never gets old. Honestly, some of the other old-fashioned stories like
Period
Road
pieces.
to Avonlea or whatever that they
yeah.
CBC has put out. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
who wanted to watch that?
I don't think they even wanted to watch it.
No.
Probably cringing in the couches.
But surely Murdock's saleable elsewhere. It's funny, you know. This is really Murdock shows what Canadians really are like. It's what we really enjoy. You know, maybe a little more wholesome than.
Yeah, it's kind of like you know,
countries of the world.
he's kind of got that Alex Trebek thing going. You know, he's kind of a square fella. You know.
And we might not want to admit to that a lot of the time that we're.
Let's face it, we're a bunch of squares, and I
really
prefer
are.
it that way.
Yeah.
So you know, when you get Drake
Canadians are not that
ding-batting around
interesting, but
on the sidelines at NBA.
Friendly.
And he's representing Canada. He's misrepresenting Canada. Gosh, that's awful. It's so embarrassing. Idiot.
Yeah. You want to know what Canadians would do? Think, what would Murdock do?
Yeah, or Alex Trebek or
That's
something like
Canada,
that. Yeah.
Canada for you.
Yeah. And don't do what Drake would do. Gosh, what a.
Anyway, so but watching this and then this, and then going back to this again because I've decided to watch it again for probably the third or fourth time. I don't know. I really love watching this show, so I will watch it again, even after this time. I mean, there's so much more art here than in that last episode. It was quite sad. And character development and everything, it's fantastic. It's really, it's a work of art. Better Call Saul, season 4, every season of it.
Yeah, they got so much more on the ball. I mean, with Blacklist, it's basically James Spader just dragging a bunch of stuff around to a large extent.
Well, there was one episode with the guy who dings the bell. He's not dinging the bell in this
No, thank
season.
heavens.
But from Breaking Bad, you know which one I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in Blacklist for an episode. So that was
They've
nice
got
to
some
see.
fairly good people. I mean, I think what's his name, Brian Keith or something like that. Apparently died after doing maybe his last stint on TV or small screen. I can remember when he played John Wayne Gacy TV. I think that was a mini series, you know. I think it was more like just made for TV. It was pretty convincing and fairly scary.
But here I went and talked a lot, and you were supposed to be the one to
Well,
do this.
you know the stuff better than I do. I tend to.
I do. I fall asleep a lot too.
Well, I fall asleep, or sometimes I'll just listen to it.
Not
I'll have
because
my
the
back
stuff
turned.
is boring.
No, it's just I've got stuff that I have to get done. Reading is, to me, is much more essential. I don't learn that much from watching or from hearing, whatever. really pick things up.
Although there's some interesting things like we found this with watching James Spader in the past. He will he likes to put himself into stories that actually inform about various issues. It could
It was
be about
blood that way in Boston Legal, wasn't it? Yeah. So
And there are things that, like in Boston Legal, it was, he was talking about the wild salmon and how they just monkeyed they said they weren't endangered anymore because they used farmed salmon populations to bring the numbers
Yeah.
up, and it's ridiculous, right? So,
wild domestic.
yeah.
Good old paradox there, oxymoron.
And I had wondered about that when I
Yeah.
looked at I knew the wild salmon populations were really in trouble, and then I noticed all of a sudden they weren't in trouble anymore, and I'm like, what in the world? What happened that made, their life all of a sudden better or whatever? And I guess it was really just a lie. So, and in this one, he talks about, at some point, there's an episode where there's a guy who hears ringing constantly from some sort of sound pollution.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
He didn't really handle it very well, as I recall.
no, he really didn't. But I mean, we see that people have legitimate problems with it, and in this show, they're kind of treating Chuck's effects from electricity. They're treating it kind of like a mental illness. And I don't know that it really is. I mean, there have been legitimate studies done that show that our cells and stuff are really reacting poorly to like electrical noise and stuff, and we're not conscious of it. It's all around us. Like, there are waves going through me right now while I'm sitting here, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's just a part of modern life, right? And it's pretty hard to get away from.
Yeah.
But
Doesn't help that Pauline's house is right in corners on an alley, and they put
big
a
power lines.
They put a big power line right
Yeah,
next
some
to it.
people have. So I know that when I go to sleep at night, there's a power line just outside my bedroom, just outside my bed. Like, my bed's on the outside wall, and I should not be there. And I realized it as soon as I started sleeping there. I could hear a high pitch, like, not really a ring, but a kind of a static noise or whatever, like a high pitch. Yeah, it's not good. And so it makes it hard for me to get to sleep because I hear that noise, right? And it's the electricity. And I know it is, but because it started once they moved that pole there.
Yep.
And I used to have the bed there, and I didn't have a problem with it. But once they moved the pole,
Yeah,
all
it
of
was
a sudden
also,
hear
I
it.
knew that would, well, you really knew it was going to cause problems when they were out surveying, right?
Yeah, I was concerned.
And they were saying, oh, relax. When people say that,
Well, I don't know.
that's when I start to get tense for some reason or
I
another.
don't think they said relax. I don't think I said anything to them about it. I wasn't thrilled, but
Yeah, I did a lot
Oh,
of
you
talking
said.
to them. I think you sent me out too.
I didn't send you out.
I can't remember
I
what happened.
definitely wouldn't have sent you out.
Anyway, I talked with them, and they were saying, we'll take care of everything. Don't worry.
Well, there were some things I wasn't thrilled about. I did go out and complain. Well, not really complain. I was in the house and I hear there's somebody on my roof. And I'm like, so I went out and, I mean, they could have just used they have a bucket, and they were like, my roof, the hookup would be, 5 feet away? Like, not very far. They could have just,
Yeah, they were real bozos. I think
but
that would
instead
have
they
been
decided to get on the roof.
Lethbridge Power.
Well, it would have been the city, and so they were like, "Oh, he knows what he's doing," and I'm like, Interesting, because he didn't knock on my door first to say, oh, I'm going to be on your roof or whatever.
We might have just said stay
And
off.
if it would have been a wealthy person, there's no way that they would have went into their yard or went on their roof without letting them know first.
And believe me, a wealthy person would have let them know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in court.
Mm-hmm. So I wasn't thrilled about that.
We're too tolerant of that sort of stuff, I gotta say. So we were talking about issues with farming fish and stuff like that. Maybe we can talk about farming animals in intensive situations.
Yeah, just hold up.
Did you know that, Pauline, that they're using antivirals in feedlots?
I didn't know.
I didn't know that.
Pay attention to it. So that's The Veganist by Kathy Freston.
So presumably they're using something like flu vaccines? And
they're using antibiotics, but
So according to this 2011, so this is just preliminary thing.
I don't know what.
Yeah. Antivirals in those sort of situations. So this woman is talking about the H1N1, H5N1. Apparently, 60% of the folks that get it die. Swine flus, stuff like that. The important thing is, Pauline has been talking about this. He started talking about it before 2011, right?
Oh, a lot of people have been talking about it.
I know, but not enough. People should have been predicting this kind of stuff.
It's interesting,
from,
a lot of people have been ignoring or haven't been wanting to hear things that they don't want to hear, right? And so things like that go basically unnoticed or whatever. I don't know. It's like the COVID thing right now. People are treating it like it's no big deal, and I don't know how to get through to people.
This is as Jim Morrison put it, doesn't have to be this way, but I've seen people don't want to change their behavior. This is the end. The end of, I can't remember what he says, but soft lies. Okay? You guys, we all have been living on soft lies. And Pauline's called some of them out. I've been calling some of them out. Lots of soft lies.
It's not the end of them, though, James. It will continue. That's what it's. I don't know how to. It's like when the economy fell apart there in 2008, and you were like, "Oh, now this whole Friedman economics."
Yeah.
And,
I was saying, what I said was, there's no excuse for it now. And there is no excuse.
And
Friedman,
I was like, what are you talking about? People will still be, this is going to continue. This hasn't changed anything, They won't want to hear.
And we got a great course 4 years later, 2012, doing that exact sort of thing, Milton Friedman's God, and stuff like that. But those are soft lies. When I say it's the end, I'm not saying it's the end of soft lies.
Okay.
It's the end of the good times. It's the end of the good time. Pauline is saying could be like the end of civilization. We don't smarten up.
Well, it is the end of civilization for a lot of people. I mean, how many have died so far from COVID?
Coming up to 1 million worldwide. Be close to 900,000.
And, I mean, it's not the end of COVID. This is just the beginning, really. We're just going into winter.
Yep.
What do you think it's going to be like?
Well, I think it's vitamin D related. People are going to be vitamin D starved up in the northern hemisphere, where the vast majority of the world's population is. So I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty bad in Europe, bad in Canada, bad in the United States. It's already awful there. How many people have died now? It's coming up towards 200,000. I think it's something like 190,000, 180 and change. And it won't be too long before it'll be 4 times the total deaths in Vietnam. In Vietnam, United States, it would have been roughly done in 10 years or so.
Yeah,
Whereas
I wish we
here
had
it's
dual
less than a year
citizenship
so
right
far.
now, and with New Zealand. Because New Zealand, they're good and boring, just like us Canadians.
Yeah. I think they shut their borders down.
Yeah, well, that was smart.
Of course. It's what any smart leader would have done.
And they're getting out of winter. So even though their numbers are a little higher right now, they should be falling. Anyway.
So this is the end. I will be reviewing this a little bit later on. I'm only about a third of the way through. But the last thing I was reading before I came up was that thing about antivirals. And I want to congratulate the folks in the, I suspect it was in the meat industry. Might have been China itself, came up with the bat thing. And also, I think the wet markets are a little bit of a dodge. It would be really coming from Chinese factory farms. They've got a lot of them. But it could have happened here, quite possibly.
Yeah, it could have happened here just as easily.
Anyway, you flunkies out there who came up with the bat thing, that's wonderful. Very good, very imaginative.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't believe that bat thing either. But then I don't believe this was an accident.
I think it was, but like the whole thing is, I can't really offer any sort of proof, against the idea that, for example, the Chinese were behind this. Terrorists could have been behind it. If anyone was behind it, I say
In
it
any
would be the
case,
Chinese.
I mean, if it was a
People's
legitimate,
Republic of China, let's get that straight.
if it
I
was
support
a
Taiwan.
legitimate accident, then we have to learn from it and stop the factory farming.
No, the people aren't in learning mode.
So
the end
it depends
of
which
soft
one
lies.
do you want to believe? Do you want to believe that it was an accident and this came from another species, this pandemic?
Yeah, from bats. You want to believe that?
And I mean, we're not going to be able to. I mean, not us, but humans aren't going to be able to eat meat for much longer anyway. I mean, it's going to...
It's bad for the environment.
Yeah.
It's ethically bad for the animals.
Even if a whole pile of people end up dying, so the world's population goes down. Unless you have a plan on how to keep it down. And is that plan accidental pandemics all the time? Is that what the plan is? To call the herd?
Yeah, just take out the poor people. But let the classy people survive.
Yeah.
Who knows what's happening?
Anyway, quite a stack there.
I got a stack, but...
You don't feel like talking about them?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
That's next on the agenda. Excuse me. So I reviewed this one the other day. The stories of Bernard Malamud, published in 1983. And it's maybe, it's not relatively complete, but it's, there's a substantial number of stories. So if we go back, with God's grace to the side, we go Idiots First. This is a collection of his short stories from 1963. I suspect. I'm kind of guessing it. They didn't make it totally clear. This is from 1970, the collection of his short stories. This is from 1983. Now the trouble with this, the 1983 collection, is many of the stories in it, I think 7 come from here, 7 come from here. So he's rehashed some of them, and then 10 are new in the decade between 1970 and 1983. So when I finished these books up, I just read the stuff that I hadn't read from here. Right? So I think there's 4 here and only 1 actually here. So it's not as though I went through a huge column for reading. Guy's a pretty good short story writer. He wrote I think their novels, movies are based on The Fixer and The Natural. He's a pretty good writer. He seems to do character pretty well. He's kind of like an American kind of thing. He really doesn't. He can use some fancy words, but he doesn't chuck them around. I don't think that is necessarily being a virtue. By times, it's good to write stuff that's simple and straightforward. But if you can write stuff that's complicated, complex, or whatever you want to call it, it shows to me that you're actually capable of having a kind of range of approaches. Anyway, enjoyed the short stories pretty well. A couple of ones that are kind of weird. Jewbird, kind of like surreal. What was another one? Forgotten the name. Anyway, when he writes the surreal stuff, it's a little less. It's more like when he's dealing, I think he must come from New York, somewhere around. He's got a Jewish kind of name. I think Malamud would mean something like learner. I think the LMD root means it has something to do with learning, something like that. So it might mean scholar or whatever. He's kind of a scholarly kind of guy. But the stuff that he writes best is like Jewish background, Yiddish background, that sort of stuff, right? Which is, that's how we get the story Jubber, which again, it's kind of weird. Oh yeah, the other one was it the Centaur or something like that? I can't remember what it was. The short story that was kind of surreal, didn't work. So this thing is kind of like a sci-fi novel. The world ends. So it's called God's Grace. And, I don't know if God's actually that graceful in this story. So then the world ends, a nuclear holocaust, and then God, to compound matters, brings on the flood. And I'm going, yeah, nuclear holocaust is enough. So why do you chuck the flood in there? Like he's constantly bringing in Jewish, well, what people prefer to call myth or something like that.
Old Testament stuff.
Old Testament. And the Old Testament is a lot of different things. Don't call it, for Pete's sake, a myth. So it is, if you went and looked at the Blackfoot year count and said that's myth, you'd be taken, and quite rightfully, to task. But no one, when they do that with Jewish stories and things like that, or history, and they when you get people saying, oh, they picked it up from the Babylonians during the captivity, that's recent. That's starting something like 576 BC. That's recent. And they picked up all of their stories and history and myth from the Babylonians. That is insulting. I'm not going to call it anti-Semitic. It is just disgustingly insulting. If you did that with any other racial group, any other cultural group, with the possible exception